The thing about losing $1 billion is that it doesn't happen slowly. It doesn't creep up on you. It doesn't send a warning. One day you're on the cover of Forbes, and the next day, your lawyers are explaining what personal liability means in very uncomfortable detail. 6 people. Combined, they controlled over $150 billion in wealth. And every single one of them watched it disappear, not because of bad luck, not because the market was cruel, but because of decisions they made, in rooms full of people who were too afraid to say no. This isn't a story about failure. Failure is normal. This is a story about something far more interesting. The specific moment each of them crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Stay until the end. The last case destroyed $2 billion in under 7 seconds. No fraud, no scandal, just one sentence. It might be the most brutal one. Chapter 1. Richard Fooled. The Man Who Broke the World. September 14, 2008. 1 a.m. New York City. Richard Fooled was alone in his office on the 31st floor of Lehman Brothers headquarters. Outside, his executives were in emergency talks with every major bank on Wall Street, begging for a buyer. Inside, Fooled was convinced, genuinely, completely convinced, that nobody would let Lehman fall. He was wrong. By morning, Lehman Brothers, 158 years old, the 4th largest investment bank in the United States, filed for the largest bankruptcy in American history. $613 billion in debt. Gone overnight. Here's what made Fooled different from every other executive on Wall Street. He didn't just take risks. He became the risk. While other banks were quietly reducing their exposure to toxic mortgage assets, in 2007, Fooled doubled down. He fired the executives who disagreed. He dismissed the analysts who raised concerns. He reportedly told one subordinate who suggested selling assets, "We are not a distressed seller." The irony. He had multiple chances to sell Lehman before the collapse. Korea Development Bank, Barclays Bank of America. Every deal fell apart, some say because Fooled's asking price was too high. Some say because he simply refused to accept that his empire was already on fire. When the U.S. government bailed out Bear Stearns months earlier, Fooled interpreted it as a guarantee. If they saved Bear, they'd save Lehman. They didn't. He collected $484 million in compensation in the 8 years before the crash. The 25,000 employees who lost their jobs collected nothing. The committee that later investigated the collapse found evidence of accounting maneuvers designed to hide billions in debt from investors. Fooled denied knowing. Nobody believed him. Nobody charged him either. He still lives in a $14 million mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. Masajo Son, the man who lost $70 billion and called it a lesson. Most people, after losing $70 billion, would retire quietly. Masayoshi Son is not most people. March 2000. SoftBank stock had risen 193% in a single year. Son's personal net worth peaked at $78 billion, briefly making him the richest man on earth, richer than Bill Gates. He had invested in nearly 800 internet companies during the dot-com boom, convinced that the digital revolution would make every bet profitable. Then the Nasdaq crashed, and Son didn't just lose money. He lost $70 billion in 99 days. The Guinness World Records listed it as the largest personal financial loss in history. Most CEOs would call it a correction and adjust. Son called it a temporary setback and kept building. To his credit, his early bet on Alibaba, a $20 million investment that turned into over $50 billion, became one of the greatest trades ever made. But here's where it gets interesting. Son didn't learn the lesson everyone thought he learned. He just waited for the next cycle. Fast forward to 2017. Son raises the Vision Fund, $100 billion, the largest tech investment fund ever created. His pitch: bet big, bet fast, bet on the future. He invested in WeWork at a $47 billion valuation, in Uber, in DoorDash, in dozens of companies, burning cash at historic rates. By 2019, the Vision Fund had lost $17 billion. WeWork's IPO collapsed. Several portfolio companies went bankrupt. Son stood in front of investors and called it embarrassing. He's still running SoftBank. He still thinks he's right. The scale just keeps changing. The most dangerous investor in the world isn't the one who's never lost. It's the one who's lost everything and is still convinced he's a genius. Elizabeth Holmes. The performance. Here's a question nobody asks about Elizabeth Holmes. What if she believed it? Not the fraud part. The part before. The part where a 19-year-old Stanford dropout genuinely convinced herself that she could revolutionize medicine with a device that didn't work, and then spent the next 15 years pretending it did. Theranos promised to run over 200 medical tests from a single drop of blood. The technology never functioned as advertised. Not even close. The machines Theranos actually used for patient tests were competitors' devices hidden in the back, rebranded, used without authorization. At its peak, Holmes was worth $4.5 billion on paper. She was on the cover of every magazine. Time, Fortune, Forbes. She wore the same black turtleneck every day, yes, deliberately, and spoke in a voice she had consciously lowered to sound more authoritative. The collapse came not from a market crash or a bad investment. It came from a Wall Street Journal reporter named John Carreiro, who spent 2 years finding the employees Theranos had silenced with NDAs and legal threats. When the story broke in 2015, the valuation evaporated. The FDA shut down the lab. The company dissolved. Holmes was indicted on federal fraud charges. Her defense: she said she genuinely believed in the technology, that she was a victim of a manipulative partner, that she never intended to deceive anyone. The jury didn't buy all of it. In January 2022, she was convicted on 4 counts of fraud, sentenced to over 11 years in federal prison. $4.5 billion to a prison cell. The turtleneck didn't help. What do you think? Was Holmes a visionary who went too far? Or was it calculated fraud from day one? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Adam Neumann, The Cult, January 2019. WeWork was valued at $47 billion. Adam Neumann was worth $14 billion on paper. SoftBank had just written the largest check in startup history to fund his vision of elevating the world's consciousness. 9 months later, the IPO collapsed. The valuation dropped to $8 billion. Neumann was forced out of the company he founded. He walked away with $1.7 billion. Wait, that's not losing everything. That's the point. Adam Neumann is on this list, not because he went broke. He's here because he should have, and somehow didn't, which tells you everything about how the system actually works. WeWork was, at its core, a commercial real estate company that signed long-term leases and rented desks on short-term contracts. Simple model. Existed for decades. Neumann's genius, and it was a form of genius, was convincing investors it was a tech company, powered by community and energy, and a CEO who occasionally surfed through the office hallways. The IPO prospectus used the word community 150 times. It described WeWork as a company dedicated to elevating the world's consciousness. One analyst read it and reportedly said, "This is the work of a man who has never been told no." He was right. At the peak, Neumann was taking out hundreds of millions in personal loans against his WeWork stock. He trademarked the word "we" and sold it back to his own company for $5.9 million. His wife had veto power over his successor. He brought a rabbi and a shaman to company retreats. The moment SoftBank's Masayoshi Son stopped believing, the whole thing unraveled in weeks. Neumann lost the company. He kept the money. He's currently building his next startup in real estate. Again, some people learn from failure. Some people just repackage it. Sam Bankman-Fried. The collapse that everyone should have seen coming. November 2nd, 2022. A single article published by CoinDesk revealed that Alameda Research, Sam Bankman-Fried's trading firm, had most of its assets in FTT, a token created by SBF's own exchange, FTX. In plain English, his companies were using made-up money to back each other. 6 days later, FTX filed for bankruptcy. $32 billion in valuation. Gone. An estimated $8 billion in customer funds. Missing. SBF, as everyone called him, had become the face of crypto legitimacy. He donated to politicians on both sides. He testified before Congress. He advocated for regulation. He gave interviews about effective altruism, a philosophy of earning as much money as possible to give it away. He wore cargo shorts and a t-shirt to meetings with senators. The image was impeccably constructed. The substance was chaos. Inside FTX's Bahamas headquarters, a $30 million penthouse where senior executives also lived, there were no internal financial controls, no CFO for most of the company's existence. Customer funds were transferred to Alameda to cover trading losses. When Alameda's bets went wrong, FTX customer accounts were the cushion. When CoinDesk published that article, Binance's CEO publicly offered to acquire FTX, then reviewed the books and walked away the next day. The speed of the collapse was breathtaking. In less than 2 weeks, gone. SBF was arrested in the Bahamas in December 2022, extradited to the U.S., tried, convicted on all 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy, sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. His parents were law professors at Stanford. They attended every day of the trial. Effective altruism, 25 years. The math didn't add up. Gerald Ratner, $2 billion destroyed in 7 seconds. And then there's Gerald Ratner. No fraud, no Ponzi scheme, no overvalued startup, no Silicon Valley delusion. Just one sentence. April 23, 1991. Gerald Ratner was CEO of the Ratner Group, the largest jewelry retail chain in the world, with over 2,500 stores across the UK and the US. His personal fortune was worth approximately $2 billion in today's terms. He was the dominant force in affordable jewelry retail, the man who had turned his family's modest shop into a global empire. He was invited to speak at the Institute of Directors annual conference in London, one of the most prestigious business events in the UK. Thousands of executives in the room, cameras rolling. Ratner was known for being funny, charismatic, self-deprecating. He figured he'd get a laugh. He pointed to one of his products, a sherry decanter set, priced at £4.95, and told the audience, "People say to me, how can you sell this for such a low price? I say, because it's total crap." The room laughed. Ratner laughed. He kept going, saying one of his earring sets was cheaper than an M&S prawn sandwich, but probably wouldn't last as long. The press got the quotes the next morning. Within days, customers stopped buying. Within weeks, the stock collapsed. Within months, Ratner was forced out of the company that bore his name. The Ratner Group lost approximately £500 million in market value, wiped out by a joke at a conference. He later reflected, "I made the cardinal error of not taking it seriously enough." He rebuilt. He launched an online jewelry business. He recovered, partially, but the company his family built over decades, the brand with his name on it, gone. Because of a laugh. 7 seconds. $2 billion. The most expensive punchline in business history. 6 empires. 6 implosions. 1 pattern. None of these people were stupid. Fuld built one of Wall Street's most powerful institutions. Sun made bets that redefined venture capital. Holmes convinced the smartest investors in the world to fund an idea. Newman turned office rental into a cultural phenomenon. SBF built the second largest crypto exchange on earth. Ratner created the world's biggest jewelry chain. They were all extraordinarily capable. And every single one of them had a moment, one specific moment, where someone in the room knew it was going wrong and said nothing. Or said something and was ignored. Here's the question worth sitting with. In your world, are you the one speaking up or the one making sure no one does? Boa. Reflexo. These facts classically portray several everyday episodes we experience in our daily lives. We identify that something is wrong. We usually speak up, but nobody listens to us. We end up being labeled as annoying or old-fashioned. And that's because we are the minority, in my opinion. The final result, we already know. The people who do wrong always end up coming out ahead. Next video. The billionaires who lost everything and came back richer than before. The ones who actually used a collapse as a blueprint. That story is genuinely different from what you'd expect. If you don't want to miss it, subscribe. It drops this week. See you in the next one.